All right. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. I appreciate it. So this will be recorded, so you'll be able to refer back to it later. We'll put it on our website. Um, but thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today. As most of you know, or all of you know, I'm Ben Anderson. I oversee business development here, also a shareholder with Run Networks. We have Brandon Gordon, who's the president of Run Networks and kind of leads our technical side of things. So today, let's go ahead and get moving on this here. So today we want to kind of discuss a shift in some of the cybersecurity, uh, some of the changes in the cybersecurity world that we've been seeing. So the conversation mainly focuses around two things, the first being VPN, and the second being logging. And our goal is just to make sure that we're checking all the boxes, we secure our networks to the fullest extent possible, and we're mitigating risk for you and ourselves, right? So we're going to start with kind of talking about the threat landscape a little bit and how it's changed over the last 5 years. So we're going to rewind back to 2020. We saw some compromises from trusted vendors, and it made us kind of question, like, are we doing the right things? Are we protecting ourselves from our vendors? Are we protecting ourselves from the proper things? And is everything set up correctly, right? So in 2021, we added application allow listing with a zero trust approach, which most of you, if not all of you, know is Threat Locker, right? And so we felt good about it, but we knew there was a little more needed, right? We want someone really actively monitoring stuff that would maybe slip through Threat Locker or whatever that may be, right? Having fail safes is always good. So in 2022, shortly after, we introduced MDR, which is Huntress. It's managed detection and response, which is basically watching for risky activity, behavior, that sort of thing on computers to make sure that if something were to get through ThreatLocker or something was already approved through ThreatLocker, it would still be caught if it was malicious, right? Fast forward a little further to 2024, and we realize, Windows is feeling good, but cloud is kind of as big of a problem, if not bigger, than the risk we had with computers not having application allow listing on it or MDR. And so we introduced Cloud MDR. So now Huntress is watching all the activity in Microsoft 365. They're looking for improbable travel, potentially compromised logins, spoofed logins. And there was an additional need at that time in 2024 where we had to implement some DNS changes on email. You may have noticed that a lot of emails that you historically got directly to your inbox were starting to go to spam and those sorts of things. And a lot of that was due to changes needing to be made to ensure that the email domain that's sending to you is legitimately what it is, rather than a spoofed or faked email domain. I'm sure we've all seen all those fake emails. And it just seems like every time we have good posture on security or something, something new comes along, right? It needs to be addressed. And so that's kind of why we're talking about VPN and logging today. But fast forwarding, so because we did all these things from 2020 to 2024, we've seen lower premium increases. In a lot of cases, actually, we've had clients not get premium increases on their cyber insurance, which is awesome. The average is 33 to 35%, I believe. We've seen much quicker response times with potential incidences. I mean, think back to, even 5, 10 years ago, you wouldn't know an email is compromised until you saw something wasn't quite right. Maybe emails are going to delete or you're not getting replies you're expecting, things like that, right? Now, within about 15 minutes, we have suspected compromised accounts or confirmed compromised accounts isolated, remediated within a 15-minute window. It's phenomenal, right? We have more awareness of how and where company assets and resources are being used, right? And just overall lower risk, right? We've greatly increased our security posture for ourselves and our clients, which is awesome. But the threat landscape is now shifting away from some of those things that we have addressed over to SSL VPN. So just kind of level set here, and we will take questions at the end, so feel free to throw them in chat. We have someone watching for them. But VPN is a software that allows you to connect to your office, generally behind the firewall or your network, right? So it allows you to be behind the same network, same security, the same policies as when you're in the office, and it helps protect the data. And to clarify, we're talking about a VPN that connects you back to your network, work network, not like NordVPN or Proton or Norton. Those are all called proxy VPNs. It's completely different. Just like we said before, we promoted SSL VPN. We always have, right? And it's still the standard for VPN. But as soon as we realize it's being attacked, we know we need to kind of shift away from that and at least educate you that, hey, this is now being targeted, and here are some options to kind of get away from that situation. But there's also other benefits. It's not just the security side of things. Um, for us, it's really frustrating that VPN is being targeted, but it just simply is. We'll be addressing how and how we're going to address this here in a moment. The other side of the threat landscape is we're starting to see additional regulations and recommendations for logging, right? So just logging of activity. NIST recommends every technology asset be monitored and logged 24/7, which is crazy. If you really want to read into this and get the details, NIST SP 800-92 talks about monitoring and logging status of all log sources, log rotation, archivals, and other best practices around logging. It's not bullet points, guys. This is a 72-page document about logging. If you are having a hard time going to sleep, I would highly recommend reading this article, and you'll get sleep in no time. Basically, what they're stating here is if you're going to be monitoring and logging things 24/7 and it's being monitored, this is what's called a SIEM, SIEM, SIEM. Without a SIEM, this is surprisingly really difficult to do, and it's a lot of data, and it's really, really difficult to actually monitor, right? So even if we did log everything, no one's watching every single log that comes through. So that's the other side of the problem that we'll kind of talk about today. But let's start out with VPN. So there's some common misconceptions with VPN that we want to talk about. But just to remind you, so the VPN that we're talking about is the software that allows you to connect to your office network. This is not like a proxy VPN like Norton or Nord or anything like that. So one of the common misconceptions is we use cloud tools, we don't need a VPN. Well, it's true you don't need a VPN to connect to your cloud tools. What you're not addressing is the network that you're on. So if you're at a coffee shop or at home, there's other computers on that network, and things can actually jump from computer to computer. It's normal. And so one of the things that VPN does is it actually separates you from being accessible to the other computers on a network. It puts you in your own protected pocket, right? And so that's actually kind of what we're trying to address with VPN regarding a cloud environment or a hybrid environment, is you still need to kind of separate your work computers or your company-owned devices from untrusted networks or public networks, right? We don't need Timmy's who knows what software jumping over to a company computer. I can add a VPN to my home computer and connect to work. That's a really common misconception as well. This goes back to what we were talking about just a bit before. VPN and proxies are super different. Most publicly available inexpensive VPNs are actually proxies that mask your address. So that's going to be your Nord, your ExpressVPN, Norton, so on and so forth, right? You don't necessarily want that in business. Here's why. So the majority of successful breaches actually come from a machine using one of those public proxies, meaning that service from a business perspective looks really risky. And so for business, we want to know who's accessing things and from where. And using a business class VPN can actually allow you to know what machines are accessing your data and your systems. And that's honestly critical for proper security. Another misconception is my company isn't a target. We don't hold important data. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, and I continue to hear it. Fraudsters do not care what type of data you have. They're not dumb. They understand that businesses make money and generally have insurance, and that's what they're after. They're after a payday, right? And so if they can impede your ability to conduct business, hold you ransom for money, or extort money from you or who you work for or with, they're going to do that, right? So don't just think about it at surface value. It's not the level of sensitivity your data is. It's the fact that you're a business and you generate money and they're going to try to extort you for it, or who you work with, right? So in summary, a VPN's goal is really to gain trusted access from a trusted remote network and isolate the computer from an untrusted local network like home or a coffee shop. So a couple of issues with traditional VPNs, and if you've used a traditional VPN, I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's a couple major issues with them. One is it requires a port being open on your network. So now your network is accessible to the worldwide internet, right? Two, there's connection timeouts. If you use a VPN, you know, hey, I have to re-authenticate every 4 to 6 hours. Got to type in my username, my password, my multi-factor, re-log in. And then traditional SSL VPN slows down your work. It uses the lowest common denominator, meaning if I have super lightning fast internet at the office, But at home, I'm paying for 25 by 5 megabits through Cox or something. 5 megabits is going to be your total speed, but back and forth. So it really can slow you down quite a bit. We do have a different VPN that we have out there. It's called a Ready Ethernet device. And so that's a hardware VPN. It does alleviate a lot of those concerns. The speed isn't nearly as bad, but it doesn't time out. It does still require a port being open, but it's generally more secure. But it doesn't address the mobile issue, right? You can't take this physical hardware everywhere you go with you. That's kind of the problem with that. So why we care is open ports on the firewall it's just another attack vector or potential attack vector, right? So our goal as your IT company is to try to reduce your attack surface and make you as nimble as possible in the security space, right? Having a port open, it's a trusted method, and it has been forever, but should it be? People are now extorting this. Maybe it shouldn't have been the standard for a long time, right? Uh, the user must re-authenticate multiple times a day, decreasing efficiency. Think about this. Think about when you have to re-log in, enter a username, password, multi-factor, and now multiply that over the amount of people that you have, you're losing efficiency. A lot of times people don't even know their VPN's disconnected, which can cause some data corruption issues as well. Or at a bare minimum, it exposes your machine, your company-owned device, to that untrusted public network now when the user doesn't realize, hey, my VPN isn't connected. Excuse me. Lastly, time is money. No one has time to be waiting on things to load. No one wants to be limited to the lowest common denominator on their internet speed. And this is really problematic when you're relying on SSL VPN for a wide number of people, right? If you have one person that uses it heavily, you can kind of weigh the cost benefit analysis there. But if this is, hey, my whole team uses SSL VPN, you may not even know how much time you're losing on people just waiting on stuff to load, right? It's like back when we had the old school spinning disk drives in our computers, and man, you could go pour a cup of coffee, read the morning newspaper, sit down at your desk, get things settled before your computer's even turned on, ready to log in, right? SSL VPN is kind of like that. It just slows everything down. So what is the industry moving to? How do we fix this, right? So what the industry is moving to instead of SSL VPN is what's called a SASE solution, SASE. You can see in the diagram here that we have a depiction of how SASE kind of works. So what happens is whether you're hitting your internal network or you're going out to the cloud or whatever it is, your traffic actually routes through the SASE application if necessary and goes out to the destination. Meaning I can make your network in the office accessible with this always on VPN, but all your other traffic to go to YouTube or whatever doesn't necessarily need to go through the VPN. The other big benefit here is you'll notice it's cloud hosted. So it doesn't, the actual SASE solution is hosted in the cloud. It's always on, it's always available, and it's much quicker routing. It doesn't limit you on internet speed like a traditional SSL VPN does, which is pretty cool. Total is the vendor that we've been using and have been using it for a number of months in a trial period. And we are very comfortable at this point saying, hey, this is a really good solution. So the other huge benefit here is when you're traveling, your location changes all the time, right? If you're using SASE though, this is an always on VPN, keep in mind. The security team, Run Networks and Huntress, our SOC, can actually see, even though your location is changing, you're using a trusted service, Total or SASE, that you've already authenticated against. It's super important for MDR and especially Microsoft 365 MDR to know, hey, even though this location is changing and hopping, they're using a trusted authenticated service, and I know it's on their machine. So it actually alleviates the issue of a false positive, which is pretty cool. So just to kind of recap, I know I went into a lot of detail there. The high level advantages of the SASE solution are Total. It doesn't require an open port. So there's cloud-based routing, no ports open, right? All the traffic routes through the cloud and then to the destination or to the office, which is awesome. It's much more efficient. The connection is always on. When I boot up my computer in the morning, Total is on. I don't have to think twice. I don't have to do anything. It's just ready to rock. It's pretty awesome. Much better performance. I cannot even highlight this point enough. The performance is so much better on a SASE VPN. It's unbelievable. And lastly, it's more secure. Going back to the travel point, we know you are authenticating against a trusted service. Our security team can tell that even though things are moving around or maybe you're on an untrusted network, it's coming from a trusted service, which is hugely advantageous. So anyways, now that we've covered VPN, we are going to go shift over into logging, and we will, as a reminder, have time for questions at the end. So what's the whole deal with logging and monitoring? Well, people commonly think that just because something is logged, it's being monitored, right? It's also commonly assumed that everything electronic has logging by default, which is not the case. And what's really important for you is there's two different sides to this. You need to understand what you're required to log and monitor, right? So you need to understand what do your compliance regulatory authorities require that you log? What does your cyber insurance require that you log? But then what are some things that you may want to log and monitor, right? To better secure yourself and better posture yourself and give you more understanding of what's going on in your network, right? So it's really important to clarify that monitoring and logging are not always connected. A simple example is we log into Windows, but pulling those logs is actually really difficult and there's no alerting built around it. It's very difficult to determine who is truly logging in. And honestly, the biggest problem with logging in the past and why this hasn't been a service turned on by default is it takes up a lot of disk space. We actually turned on logging for, I think, most of our computers, right, Brandon, at one point in time, Windows.
We did. We tried to.
And it
When
filled
we
up
turned it on, we archived the event logs, and then the disk started to fill up.
hard drives, right? Can't be having that. You need to be able to work on your computer. So it's just been this back and forth. And then the price of entry for any other third-party service that did this is thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars a month historically. And that's why this has kind of not really been required, a standard, or part of our services. Is just the barrier to entry is so high, and it does take a lot of storage. So what should we be considering logging? Um, we've been seeing the question on cyber insurance, do you have a SIM? SIEM. That's really the solution you need in order to be able to effectively log everything in your environment and have it monitored. Meaning someone with eyeballs, not a computer necessarily, is actually looking at things when they're determined to be risky. And we've been able to answer no this whole time without really having a problem. Mainly because we technically have the logs. They're just not being watched. And specifically with PCI compliance, we're struggling answering this with a yes. They're starting to push for this more, specifically having a SIM, making sure that things are logged and monitored. So the question that we're referring to is very specific regarding PCI compliance, and it is, do you log user logins? We struggle with this, as we just mentioned, because it takes up all the hard drive space, and it's really, really difficult to actually do from a resource standpoint. So just to kind of highlight some of the misconceptions about logging and monitoring of logs, most people think that their IT company or departments are logging data, all this data. That's just simply not the case. People also assume that IT is reviewing all the logs. It is impossible to review all the logs without having a significant infrastructure of people and automation behind the scenes. And then there's an assumption that it can all be automated easily. It cannot. It simply cannot. So at one point, like I had mentioned, we were storing the event logs and it completely filled up hard drives. That's why this kind of logging and compliance regulation is really a third-party service. It's a SIM. It requires a completely different system to do it. To kind of dive into additionally here, it takes a lot of storage. It takes even more labor. The labor cost on this is insane. You have a number of security analysts that are looking at every single log and risk ratings. Basically, it's a full-time job, and there's a lot of data to review. It's hard to know what's what, honestly. The point of all this is we're starting to see this question being asked more and more on both cyber insurance, PCI compliance, and other sorts of compliance questionnaires. We know inevitably if we're starting to see these things being asked, not yet required, but asked, it's going to be required at some point in the future. And you may already have a compliance requirement that states you need to be logging and monitoring these things. So what we do have is an actual affordable option at this point, which is pretty cool. The other thing that it does is it actually feeds more information into Huntress, our MDR solution, which is it's just sharpening your sword even more. Huntress, our MDR solution, already has access to your Microsoft 365 audit logs. It already has access to some level of Windows activity for like malicious processes and footholds and stuff. The more information that we can feed the Huntress MDR solution, the better, right? It's only going to better posture your security. So it gives you a more comprehensive understanding of your risk and the activity in the environment. The activity is actually being monitored, and this is stuff that's uncommonly monitored. Compliance regulations may actually require you to monitor this stuff, and then it does potentially reduce your actual cyber insurance premium, and it certainly increases your overall security posture. So the goal of this is really to better position you on top of checking the boxes for compliance regulations. If we can give the MDR solution, Huntress, as much insight as possible of proactive and historical information, it allows us to be even more comprehensive than it currently is. And keep this in mind, just to kind of frame the level of issues that we're seeing here. We're seeing 1 to 5 successful compromises a month. This is with all the training, all the tools we have in place. People are still clicking on things and getting their emails compromised. Fortunately, Huntress is able to respond and isolate it for the most part within 15 minutes, but there is no foolproof solution. The more data we can give this thing, the better it's going to be able to do that for you. And we're currently seeing 1 to 5 false positives a week. I will restate that. We're seeing 1 to 5 successful compromises on emails a month, 1 to 5 false positives a week. And that is with minimal data being entered in a Huntress. Imagine what this thing could do if we give it the right amount of information. That's why we want additional logging. So knowing what isn't malicious is just as important as knowing what is malicious. And so the solution is Huntress actually has a cost-effective SIEM option at this point, which is awesome. Huntress is one of our top security vendors, and they have a practical option for SMB. In order to accomplish that level of logging and monitoring, you need a SIM, and so now it's possible and financially feasible. But there is a recurring cost associated with the service. Like I'd mentioned before, the service has historically been thousands or tens of thousands of dollars a month. Huntress has a solution where it's like, I want to say $4 per device per month, something like that, and it comes with plenty of storage, and it's being monitored. It's crazy inexpensive now, which is phenomenal. So just to kind of recap our summary, SSL VPN is starting to move over to SASE, which is total in our case, and it does require new tools. There is a cost with it. It's about $15 per user per month. And then SASE is highly recommended for environments where you have people working remotely, or you're in a hybrid situation where you have people in the office sometime and working remotely some of the other time. Highly encouraged. SIM it's available for better logging and monitoring. It helps Huntress understand what's going on better protects your network, also potentially reduces your cyber insurance premium, and it certainly decreases your overall security risk and exposure. And like I said, it gives Huntress, it allows it to give it more insight to give you a more protected environment, right? So if you want to increase your security, give us a call or send us an email today, but we will go ahead and open it up for questions at this point.
Ben, I wanted to kind of quick summarize here. If you look at the stuff that we did between 2021 and even into last year, those were required. We just rolled it out for every single machine and user that we manage. This is different because technically it's not really required. We can't justify increasing cost to cover this and increasing price for you guys to pay for it. It's not at that level, which is why we're introducing it and offering it, but not actually just rolling it out and enforcing it. The other thing was on VPN, the SASE solution. There's two main avenues that you would use that. One is for cloud-based applications, and the other one is to get back to the office. So does cloud-based applications, Office 365 or whatever other cloud-based application. It provides the safe route through the internet, through that, called a VPN, but it's a protected, secured connection out in that untrusted network. And then the second part of that connection can actually route back to the office. So your mapped drives and whatever else will still work just as if you're in the office. The speed is keeping up with it nicely too. We use the files from our file server as well as cloud and everything else. And I can't believe how fast it is actually. The other thing was on the logging for the SIM piece of it. Uh, one of the questions that we had was firewall logging and even event logging, I guess. So and I'm being careful with this because technically we do log that we can pull the logs from event logs and even firewall logs. They're not kept for any duration. That's the if there is a compliance requirement, it would say something like you have to keep it for 6 months or a year. We don't have that. And then secondly, if we actually had to pull the event log to determine who logged into the machine when, that is surprisingly difficult to do. So that's why that service will come into play then. If you want to be able to check that box where you can say you can log user logins, I think that's a PCI compliance question that I've seen on that.
It is.
That's a difficult one to answer yes to, unless you can really, really do that. And then firewall logging, a lot of times that's all the activity on the network, right? Every last bit of activity that happens through the firewall is logged through that service. And it's pretty slick to have it just nicely stored. And then it's mostly in the case of a potential issue, you can then filter that log after the fact and find out what happened. So
Yep.
that's the two main things we're kind of looking at.
Yep. So Marty had a good question here. So what are we paying for currently on SSL VPN? Is the $15 per user per month over what we currently pay for? That's a great question, Marty. So currently SSL VPN is included with your firewall. That's just a service that's by default on your firewall. You do not pay anything additional for it, which is why SASE's great and not so great. It's in addition to what you're currently paying for all of your IT service. It's not replacing an existing cost.
Then though, address the issue with the Sophos Reds compared to SASE.
Oh, that is a good point. So the only instance where this is the cost may make a lot more sense for you is if you are using some of the Sophos Red devices, the Ready Ethernet device. Those are generally around 20, if my memory serves me properly. I think they're about $24 a month, maybe $20 a month per device, right? So if you have a Red for every single person that works remotely, SASE is actually going to be more cost effective for you and probably perform better. However, if you have an office, let's say that's using a Red, let's say our main office is, in Omaha, but we have an office in Lincoln, and they're using a Red device instead of a firewall, and I have 4 people working in that office off of one Red, then SASE may not be as cost effective. So we'd certainly want to have the conversation and see if it makes sense for you. But it's in addition to your current cost. If you're paying for Reds, this could actually save you some money.
And that's also why we haven't just thrown it out there as a here it is, it's available, and here's the price, because it's so unpredictable about what the cost actually is.
Yep, exactly. So good question, Marty. Any other questions that we can answer while we're here today? So Isaac had a great question. For the Huntress SIEM, the cost is $4 per month per device. Can you only have certain devices, or is it all or nothing? That's an awesome question. Brandon, why don't you go ahead and take that one?
So it's the pricing on that is per, I think, collector is what they call it, or not collector. There's a collector which collects the sys logs, but the things that actually send to the collector is what that multiplier is. So yes, basically, you wouldn't have to deploy for every single machine in the network. It can be for each firewall, which is then per site, of course. And then if you wanted to add switches and things like that, then those would be a device where there's a charge on that.
But
So it's very flexible, but also unpredictable about what the actual cost is.
yeah, it's not all or nothing is the point, but we would want to talk through, are we logging and aggregating the logs with the correct thing?
Yeah. And then there's a limit on the actual storage per month, which is, I think it's 10, is it 10 gigs of logs, which is a lot of logs. And there's a small charge for beyond that.
Yep. So it wouldn't be PCs, just other devices. It can be PCs and other devices. That's kind of the beauty of it is we can tailor the solution for whatever makes the most sense for you. Where Brandon and I come from, our perspective is the firewalls would be good to know. Maybe it's the servers, some key computers, but we would really have to talk through what is it.
If you turn on everything, if you just said, I want lots of logs, I want to keep it for a year, then the multipliers on that would be probably each PC, each server, each Windows device, switches, firewalls, and then other things that you can send to it. Uh, maybe even like cameras and printers if you wanted to go that far with it. If you wanted to cover just the basic core, then I would say firewalls is a good start. And then the question would be is if you wanted to throw in the PCs or not and have that. You don't have to, but you could if you wanted to easily. And each one of those things you add in, switches, printers, and all that, that's all the multiplier on it.
So there's a little bit of balance of what's the benefit versus the cost for sure. Thanks for the questions, Isaac. Appreciate it.
You guys feel free to reach out, or we can reach out if you have any other questions offline too. Happy to talk. And actually, we can show this to you later too. I think we can't show it live here because we'll get disconnected if we if we show it, but it's there. We're
Yeah.
actually using it right now.
Yep. So Isaac, another question. Same with SASE. Only a few users could have it. Absolutely. Yep. So we have a couple of clients that have actually been testing it out for us, and it seems to have gone really well to the point where they're moving over to paying for it, which is cool. But yeah, we only like one or two people for some of the clients, and it works great.
With the SASE, the multipliers on that are again Windows agents, but then there's also some stuff with the connection back to the office, which is another charge as well. And so remember, it's kind of like a cloud-based network that you're buying into. And there's the Windows agents, which are charged, which connect to that cloud network. But then you can connect that cloud network back to the office. That's how you would get your connection, to the office from wherever you're at. There's a charge for that too.
Yeah, so it boils down to about $15 per user per month, but it depends on all the routes and that sort of thing. That's where, once again, we'd want to
Yeah.
figure out where we need to map things to. Like I know for you where we need to map it. So we should have that conversation offline.
We tried to have a predictable cost in this, you guys, and we kind of gave up and just threw it out the window. Said we'd have to figure it out.
It comes to about $15 per user per month. But thanks again for the question. So Tina asked, will the service eventually replace the red that we're using in our Iowa office? Yeah, it could potentially. So that's where if you have two people working in that office, do we want to pay $30 a month and give them the flexibility to have the same level of protection at home? Or are we okay paying the $25 or whatever it is a month for the red just at the office? It can absolutely replace it. And I think it would potentially be advantageous for you in your particular situation, Tina, to replace it. But I'd want to talk through it with you and make sure we're really addressing an issue.
The Sophos Reds are really they're still nice, don't get me wrong. And what we like about them is it's an actual hardware appliance. So if you have a PC at a home network, you can throw it in front of the PC and that device never leaves the house. So it's totally fine for that. But at the same time, the hardware device has been kind of the pain point, which is the same reason why we like that product as well. The software-based solution for laptops, even if they travel ever, then it's a nice solution. If you have a single user in a single site, you mean two remote users, two different sites, even in the same city, then that would work out good. The only thing we might hesitate is if you have multiple users in a remote office and they're all behind the single hardware device.
Yep.
In that case, the red might be a better solution.
Yeah. So Tina, let's talk through that one offline and figure out what makes the most sense. But thanks for your question. I appreciate it. All right. Anything else before we wrap up for the day?
All right.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. You know how to get a hold of us if you want to talk through this more, and we will get this up on our website shortly after it's done recording here. You all have a great rest of your day. Drive safe if you have to go out and about, and thanks for spending some of your time with us. We really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.